Hey everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive. I'm John Doe, your host, and today we're cracking open one of history's greatest mysteries, the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, yeah.
And joining me as always is Jane Doe, our resident expert on all things ancient and mysterious. Jane, ready to get scrolling?
Absolutely, John. These scrolls are like a time capsule,
Ithar.
packed with secrets and surprises.
That's exactly why we're diving into them. Now, for our listeners who might be new to this, imagine stumbling upon a collection of ancient Jewish manuscripts tucked away in caves for almost 2,000 years.
Wow.
That's the Dead Sea Scrolls in a nutshell. But here's the catch. These aren't your typical dusty old scrolls. We're talking texts that predate the oldest known biblical texts by a millennium.
I know, it's amazing.
It's credible. Jane set the scene for us. How are these incredible documents discovered?
Okay, picture this. 1947, a group of Bedouin shepherds are wandering through the Judean desert near the Dead Sea. They're looking for a stray goat, classic shepherd problems, right?
Always got to keep those goats in line.
Yeah. Exactly, but instead of finding their goat, they stumble upon a cave near a place called Qumran. Inside, hidden in jars, they discover 7 ancient scrolls.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time. I bet that got their hearts racing faster than their runaway goat.
You can say that again, but here's where it gets really intriguing. This was just the beginning. Over the next decade, more caves were discovered in the area, yielding thousands of scroll fragments.
Really?
It was like someone had taken a giant jigsaw puzzle and scattered the pieces across the desert.
That's mind-boggling. So we're not talking about a few neatly bound scrolls here. This is a massive fragmented library.
Precisely, and that presented quite the challenge for scholars. Imagine trying to piece together a puzzle with thousands of pieces, all written in ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and even Greek.
Talk about a scholarly headache. There's one cave 4 I read about where the fragments were torn into, get this, 15,000 pieces.
15,000. It's true. The sheer scale of this undertaking is incredible. And it required meticulous work, painstakingly sorting, matching, and piecing together these fragments to reconstruct the original texts.
Wow. Now these scrolls, all these fragments, who actually wrote them?
That's the million-dollar question, John. The dominant theory is that they were written by a Jewish sect called the Essenes. They were known for their strict religious practices and communal living out in the desert.
So kind of like the ancient world's off-the-grid community.
You could say that, and there's a lot in the scrolls that points to the Essenes' detailed descriptions of initiation ceremonies, rules for communal living, even their theological views. It all lines up remarkably well with historical accounts of this enigmatic group.
But I'm guessing it's not quite that simple. Are there other theories floating around out there?
Of course, not everyone is on board with the Essene theory. Some scholars believe that the scrolls might have come from multiple libraries in Jerusalem, perhaps hidden away for safekeeping during the Roman siege of the city in 70 CE.
So like a desperate attempt to preserve their history and knowledge in the face of impending destruction.
Exactly, and there's evidence to support this view, too. The scrolls exhibit a remarkable diversity of handwriting styles and intellectual perspectives, which suggests a broader range of authors than a single isolated sect like the Essenes.
Like a giant literary mystery with clues scattered across millennia. Oh, but let's get to the heart of it. What did they actually write about in these scrolls?
Well, you have to remember, these scrolls represent a treasure trove of texts from the Second Temple period, a pivotal era in Jewish history. About 40% of the scrolls are copies of Hebrew scriptures, texts that we recognize as part of the Hebrew Bible today.
Wow, so we're talking about really, really old versions of some of the most important religious texts in history.
Exactly, and amazingly, these copies are incredibly accurate, considering they were written centuries before any other biblical manuscripts we knew of. It really highlights the meticulous care taken in preserving these sacred texts.
Okay, that's seriously impressive. But what about the other 60% of the scrolls? What secrets did those hold?
That's where we delve into uncharted territory. Roughly 30% of the scrolls consist of texts from the Second Temple period that didn't make it into the Hebrew Bible texts, like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, which offer a glimpse into the diversity of beliefs and practices within Judaism at that time.
So a window into a world of Jewish thought that was considered, shall we say, a little outside the mainstream.
Precisely, these texts provide a fascinating glimpse into alternative interpretations, theological debates, and even apocalyptic visions that were circulating during that era.
That's incredible. It really challenges our assumptions about what constituted Orthodox Jewish thought during that period. So what about the final 30%? What do those texts tell us?
That's my favorite part. The last 30% are what we call sectarian manuscripts. These documents provide unique insights into the specific rules, beliefs, and rituals of certain Jewish groups, like the Essenes. for example. The community rule outlines the strict code of conduct for members of the Qumran community, while the War Scroll details a cosmic battle between the forces of good and evil.
Okay, now that sounds epic. A cosmic battle between good and evil. Sign me up. It's like we're getting a behind-the-scenes look at the inner workings of these ancient communities.
Exactly. These scrolls are a gold mine of information for understanding the social structures, religious practices, and even the political aspirations of these groups. They offer an unparalleled window into a lost world of beliefs and traditions.
It's amazing to think about the lives and beliefs of those who wrote and read these scrolls, isn't it?
It really is, and that's what makes the Dead Sea Scrolls so captivating. They're not just dusty old manuscripts, they're voices from the past whispering their secrets across the centuries.
And some of those secrets are more tantalizing than others, right? I'm thinking specifically about the Copper Scroll.
Ah, yes, the Copper Scroll. Now that's a story for the ages.
Exactly. Imagine a scroll made entirely of copper, not parchment or papyrus like the others inscribed, with a list of hidden treasures.
It's not your typical treasure map, though. It's written in a cryptic code and describes locations of valuable items, gold, silver, priestly vestments hidden in various locations throughout Judea.
Hold on, are we talking real pirate treasure here, buried gold and silver?
That's the question, isn't it? Some scholars believe the treasures were real hidden, perhaps to protect them from Roman invaders. Others think they might be symbolic, representing spiritual treasures or even metaphorical locations.
So it's a riddle, wrapped in a mystery, inside an enigma, and to top it off, it's made of copper. It's like something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie. Has anyone ever found any of this hidden treasure?
That's the biggest mystery of all. Despite numerous attempts to decipher the scroll's cryptic clues and follow its enigmatic instructions, no one has definitively located any of the Copper Scroll's treasures.
So they could still be out there, buried somewhere in the Judean desert, just waiting for an intrepid adventurer to decipher the code. That's a thought to keep our listeners up at night.
It is.
We'll dive deeper into the Copper Scroll and other fascinating mysteries hidden within the Dead Sea Scrolls after a quick break. Stay with us. Okay, we're back, and I'm still reeling from that Copper Scroll mystery. Jane, do you have any theories about what those treasures might be or where they could be hidden?
Oh, I have plenty of theories, John, but whether any of them are close to the truth, well, that's another story. The Copper Scroll is incredibly cryptic. It's like trying to solve a crossword puzzle where half the clues are missing.
That's a great analogy. But even without finding the physical treasure, the Copper Scroll itself is a treasure trove of information, isn't it?
Absolutely. It provides a unique glimpse into the material culture of the time, what people valued, what they considered sacred, and how they viewed wealth.
Right, it's not just about finding gold and silver, it's about understanding the people who created this scroll and what it meant to them.
Precisely. Now, speaking of understanding the past, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the scroll's impact on our understanding of biblical texts.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about texts that predate any other known biblical manuscripts by centuries.
Exactly. Before the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, the oldest copies of the Hebrew Bible we had dated back to around the 10th century AD.
So these scrolls push that date back by over 1,000 years. That's a massive leap.
It is, and it's a game changer for biblical scholarship. These scrolls allow us to see how these texts were transmitted, copied, and even interpreted over time.
So it's not just about having older versions, it's about seeing how these texts evolved, how they were shaped by different communities and different historical contexts.
That's a key insight, and what's remarkable is how accurately many of these ancient copies align with the later Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible. It really highlights the dedication and reverence these scribes had for preserving the words of their sacred texts.
That's incredible, but you said many align, not all of them.
That's the really fascinating part. Not all the scrolls conform perfectly to later versions. We see variations, different readings, and even entire sections that were later excluded. It's like peering into the workshop of history and seeing how these texts were assembled and refined over time.
So it's not as simple as saying, here's the original Bible, end of story.
Not at all. The Dead Sea Scrolls challenge our assumptions about the fixity of religious texts. They reveal a dynamic process of transmission, interpretation, and even editing.
It makes you realize that history, even religious history, isn't always as neat and tidy as we might like to believe.
Exactly. The scrolls force us to reconsider how we view the past, how we understand the development of religious traditions, and how we interpret sacred texts.
It's a reminder that history is a conversation, not a monologue. And the Dead Sea Scrolls have added some incredibly rich voices to that conversation.
Beautifully put, John. Now, speaking of expanding the conversation, there's another aspect of the scrolls that I find particularly captivating, those non-canonical texts we mentioned earlier, the ones that didn't make it into the Hebrew Bible.
Like the Book of Enoch, I'm definitely intrigued by those. What can they tell us?
These texts offer a glimpse into a whole universe of alternative beliefs and practices that were circulating in the Jewish world during the Second Temple period. They weren't necessarily considered heretical, but they represent a different flavor of Judaism, a different way of understanding God, the cosmos, and the role of humanity.
So it's like looking at a different branch on the tree of Jewish thought, one that didn't become the dominant trunk but still flourished for a time.
That's a great way to put it, and the Dead Sea Scrolls have given us a much clearer view of this fascinating period in Jewish history. They show us that Jewish identity and practice were far more diverse and nuanced than we once thought.
It's like we're getting a 3D view of a world that we previously only saw in flat two-dimensional terms. And speaking of adding new dimensions, how do the Dead Sea Scrolls relate to the emergence of Christianity? I know that's a topic that fascinates a lot of people.
And for good reason. Remember, the Dead Sea Scrolls were written during a period of intense religious and political upheaval in Judea, right on the cusp of the rise of Christianity. They capture the atmosphere of that time, the hopes for a Messiah, the debates about Jewish identity, and the social tensions that were simmering beneath the surface.
So they provide crucial context for understanding the world in which Christianity emerged.
Absolutely. And that's why they've been so intensely studied by scholars of early Christianity. Some believe they might even contain clues about the historical Jesus or his early followers, though that's topic of much debate.
It's incredible to think that these scrolls, written centuries before the birth of Christianity, could still shed light on the origins of one of the world's major religions.
It speaks to the interconnectedness of history, how ideas travel across time and influence events in ways we may never fully understand.
It's all connected, and the Dead Sea Scrolls are like a key that unlocks a whole network of connections we might not have even known existed.
It's like a detective story, piecing together the past using these ancient fragments as clues. And it's a story that's still being written with new discoveries and interpretations emerging all the time.
It's a story that's captivating the world, Jane. These scrolls, hidden for centuries, have suddenly become global superstars.
It's amazing, isn't it? And a lot of that has to do with the aura of mystery that surrounds them. The hidden caves, the lost treasures, the ancient secrets, it's all incredibly alluring.
And let's be honest, there's a bit of an Indiana Jones thrill to the whole thing. I mean, secret scrolls, hidden caves, lost treasures, it's the stuff of adventure movies.
You're not wrong, John. But beyond the adventure and intrigue, there's something profoundly moving about these scrolls. They're a testament to the human spirit's enduring quest for meaning, for connection, and for understanding our place in the cosmos.
Beautifully said. But amidst all the excitement and wonder, let's not forget that there's a serious side to this story, too. We touched on it earlier. The debate surrounding the scroll's ownership. Can you unpack that a bit more? First, it's a topic that deserves its own deep dive.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue deeply rooted in the history of the region, as we mentioned. Most of the scrolls are housed in Israel, but Jordan also claims ownership of some of them. And to complicate matters further, some fragments are held in private collections, adding another layer to the controversy.
So it's like a giant ancient game of capture the flag,
Yeah.
but with priceless historical artifacts instead of a piece of cloth. What are the arguments on each side?
Well, for Israel, the argument centers on the scrolls' discovery in what is now Israeli territory. They see them as part of their national heritage, crucial evidence of the historical Jewish presence in the land.
I can see their point. These scrolls tell a powerful story about the roots of Judaism in that region.
Exactly. But Jordan argues that the scrolls were found in an area that was under Jordanian control at the time of their discovery. They also emphasize the scroll's significance for understanding the history of the region as a whole, not just Jewish history.
Right. It's not just about one group's claim to history, but about recognizing the complex tapestry of cultures and religions that have shaped that part of the world.
Exactly. And then you have the added complication of the scrolls held in private collections, raising questions about ethical acquisition practices and the potential for exploitation of cultural heritage for profit.
It's a sticky situation, to say the least. And I imagine it gets even more heated when you factor in the long-standing conflict between Israel and Palestine.
It absolutely does. The ownership of the scrolls becomes entangled with broader political issues, making it even more difficult to find common ground.
Is there any hope for a resolution?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like everyone's dug in pretty deep on this.
Well, some scholars and organizations are advocating for greater international cooperation, perhaps creating a shared repository where the scrolls could be studied and displayed in a way that respects all claims and sensitivities.
That sounds like a promising idea.
Hmm.
Sharing is caring after all, especially when it comes to something as significant as the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Exactly. And some positive steps have been taken. For instance, digital imaging technology is now being used to create high-resolution copies of the scrolls, making them more accessible to scholars and the public worldwide, regardless of their location.
Okay, that's a fantastic development. It democratizes access to these incredible texts and hopefully takes some of the heat out of the ownership debate.
Hmm.
But let's talk about another controversy surrounding the scrolls. The access that scholars had to them. This was a hot topic for decades. What was the issue there?
You're right, this was a huge issue. For many years after their discovery, access to the scrolls was tightly controlled by a small, exclusive group of scholars. It created a sort of academic bottleneck, slowing down research and limiting the diversity of perspectives.
So it was like a secret club guarding their precious knowledge.
That's one way to put it, and it sparked a lot of frustration and even accusations of secrecy and elitism within the scholarly community.
I can imagine. It's like having a room full of delicious food, but only allowing a few people to taste it not cool.
Exactly. But thankfully, that situation has changed significantly in the 1990s. A full set of photographs of the scrolls was finally released to the public, thanks in part to pressure from organizations like the Biblical Archaeology Society. And with the advent of the internet and digital technologies, access to the scrolls and related scholarship has expanded dramatically.
That's a huge win for knowledge and open access. It's fascinating to think about how these ancient scrolls written on fragile parchment have entered the digital age and become part of a global conversation.
It's remarkable, isn't it? The Dead Sea Scrolls have gone from being hidden treasures in desert caves to being digitized, analyzed, and debated in classrooms and online forums around the world.
It's a testament to the enduring power of these texts to captivate our imaginations and challenge our understanding of history, religion, and even ourselves.
Well said, the Dead Sea Scrolls are a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. And a reminder that history is never truly finished. It's a story that continues to unfold, revealing new layers of meaning and complexity with every discovery, every interpretation, and every new generation that encounters these remarkable texts.
Exactly. And who knows what other secrets and surprises these scrolls still hold? What new discoveries await us as technology advances and as more scholars from diverse backgrounds delve into their mysteries?
That's what makes it so exciting. We're just scratching the surface of what the Dead Sea Scrolls can teach us, and who knows what other treasures, both literal and figurative, are still out there waiting to be unearthed.
It's a thrilling thought, isn't it? The past is a vast and mysterious landscape, and the Dead Sea Scrolls have shown us that there's always more to discover, more to learn, and more to marvel at.
Well said, Jane. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of the Dead Sea Scrolls. A huge thank you to Jane Doe for sharing her expertise and insights with us. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's been my pleasure. These scrolls never cease to amaze me.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey through time and history. We hope this deep dive has left you as intrigued and inspired by the Dead Sea Scrolls as we are. And if you have any thoughts, theories, or questions about these ancient mysteries, be sure to share them in the comments. We love hearing from. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fascinating deep dives into history's greatest enigmas. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those hidden treasures.